Hello everyone. In today's video I'm going to show you some advanced unwrapping techniques. And I'm going to go ahead and download the file that I provided you. Let me find it, hold on. It's called the Unwrap Railing lab.obj. Two ways you can do this. You can do a file import, or you can actually just run a click and drag. It'll copy it right in there, and there's your file. So here's the object that we're going to be unwrapping, and I'm going to start by selecting a new material for this. So I'm going to do assign new material. I'm going to select a Lambert because I don't want the sort of shiny sheen that the Blinn or the Fong does to distract me from the unwrap that I'm about to do. So under color, I'm going to click this little checker box, and then we're going to click on this checker right here, checker. Now I'm going to press 4, 5, 6. Now this is a way that is all texture artists and 3D modelers and whatnot properly unwrap any mesh, because we need to make sure that by the end of this, the checkerboard on this railing looks like a checkerboard across the entire thing, except maybe possibly the seam. We're going to create a seam. If I click on this, I'm actually going to switch panels, saved layouts, and perspective UV editor. Now you'll notice that the checkerboard, this is the square in which my texture or unwrap needs to be in, and clicking on it, you're going to notice that here you're going to see these bold lines. I'm going to press 5 so it's a little bit easier to see, maybe even 4. A little bit, it's a little distracting. So if I press 5, you'll see, especially in regions around the bend where we have so many different seams running through, and if I press 6 you might be able to see some of them. Yeah, so here you're going to notice it goes I think white, and then this little region here in this rectangle in the bold, within the bold white lines, should be black, and then it's going to go to white again. I'm going to press 6 just to show you. Yep. And then you're going to notice a lot of that throughout the entire thing. Our goal is to create one seam running, or technically 3, because we have the caps here at the bottom of our railing. But I'm going to make one seam running directly underneath it because it's more than likely the least seen part on this mesh, and it's going to run all the way across the bottom, all the way to the other side. Okay? So how we start doing this, I'm going to hold right click and go to my face mode, and I'm just going to go ahead and run a click and drag from here to here, and I'm going to press 5 just to make it a little bit easier visually for myself, and I just want to make sure I didn't grab any extra faces on the next edge loop. I'm going to go ahead and double check here at the bottom that I didn't select any of the caps, which I did, and I'm going to go ahead and hold shift and deselect those now. Alright, so I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this, and the first way I'm going to show you is with the standard cylindrical unwrap. Later on I'm going to show you I personally think it's a faster way, depending on what type of object you're unwrapping, but I'm going to show you the camera-based unwrap, and I'm going to show you a little trick to it. So we'll start with the cylindrical unwrap, UV, and we'll go to, what I'm doing is I'm holding spacebar, I go to UV, and I'm going to go to cylindrical. Now when it's like this, I think I have some extra faces. No, maybe not. So when it's like this, it's going to create a seam on the back side, because the way it works is this curve here, it's going to unfold it in a cylindrical fashion this way, and it's going to automatically create a seam on the back side. I want it to be on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my Y on this one, negative 90 degrees, and now it should automatically create a seam running straight down the middle across all the way to the bottom on these selected faces. So I'm going to switch back here and you're going to notice this sort of bow out at the top, and that is from the curve where it starts to curve around. So I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to move UV Shell Tool. I'm going to select it, and then I'm just going to move it out of the way. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to turn on this little icon here, which is going to project it in blue, which shows me the faces that are showing the right way. And next, I want to unfold it. So I'm going to go Tools, and I'm going to go Unfold. Unfold 3D context could not be found. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, for whatever reason that didn't work, I'm going to hold right click, go to object mode, and I'm going to just select the object. Tools, move UV Shell Tool, Tools, Unfold. And again, it doesn't work. So I'm going to go to Tools and Show UV Toolkit. I don't know why that was not working, but we'll go to Unfold here. I'm going to click Unfold, and you're going to see that it unfolds very cleanly. The Unfold tool, I don't know, this just worked the other day. I'm having some type of technical difficulties. It happens a lot in software such as this. They're very glitchy. A lot of times it's just an update that needs to be ran. Anyway, the Unfold tool works just fine. And let's see if my Rotate tool works. So my Rotate tool definitely doesn't work. The next thing I want to show you is how to move this and transform and rotate, scale, and transform it. So I'm going to go to Transform. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that in just a few moments here. I'm going to move along to the next section. One thing I want us to notice here is that I'm going to press 6 on my keyboard again in this viewport, and you're going to notice that this has now clean checkerboards across the entire thing. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Face, and I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Press 5 on the keyboard, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't have any of these faces around selected, and I'm going to go hold spacebar. I'm going to go to UV, and I'm going to do cylindrical again, and instead this time I'm going to rotate it at 90 degrees, and then I'm going to go to my, again, my UV toolkit. Tools, Show UV Toolkit, and the first thing I actually want to do is Tools, Move UV Shell Tool. I'm going to select it, move it out of the way here, and then I'm going to go down here and click my Unfold button, and now it's going to unfold that section. Alright, I can do this method one more time right on the top part. And I'm going to go here to here, and I may even be able to get away with that. That's actually fine. I'll do that. So I'm just selecting it, and I'm making sure I don't select these curved regions here. Okay. Again, I'm going to hold spacebar. I'm going to go to UV, and then I'm going to do cylindrical. Now this time you're going to notice it's going to try to unwrap it a super strange way. If I go to my UV editor here, you'll see, you may be able to see, you see a lot of the faces being pulled out this way, and that's because it's trying to cylindrically unwrap it this way versus a more easy method for this to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate, I'm going to try this one, -90, and that's exactly what I wanted it to do. So it's now rotated upwards, except it's still not right, and then I'm going to rotate this 90, and now you'll see that my projection is projecting it with the seam at the bottom. Okay. Now Good. I get to show you one thing I really wanted to show you. I'm going to move this out of the way, and you're going to see right here that it, somewhere right in the middle, it changed the seam for whatever reason. It's just the way it projected it. Now this happens to you. This is how you fix it. Hold right click and go to edge, and actually first click on the arrow tool. For whatever reason you have to select the arrow tool and then go to edge, and go ahead and start selecting these edges. Now another thing you'll notice, you'll see that even if I select on the mesh itself, it will highlight in the UV editor. It's easier to just select it, I think, this way, the way I was showing you, because you can do it directly on the mesh. Now what I'm doing is, here you're going to see right where that seam changes, and I want it to be right down this middle. I don't want it to do this little wonky little stop, turn, and then go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and select all these faces, or edges, excuse me. And I should be able to click and then run a double click, and that should select the entire thing, which it did. So then I'm going to do cut and cut. Cut, so cut. What that does, tools, move UV shell tool, is it allows me to cut that. If you think of it as like sewing, it allows me to cut it, let's just pretend with a scissors, straight down that edge. And then I'm going to have this separate piece of cloth, right? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now sew it to the other side and make it look real nice. So I'm going to click on my arrow again and hold right click and go to edge. And you'll notice as I highlight here, it's highlighting on the other edge also, because it is the same edge, it's the same seam. I'm going to hold shift and select the rest of these faces, and I'm actually going to run a double click at the bottom, and that should select the entire edges. From here I'm going to do cut sew, and then I'm going to do move and sew, and that should, and it works every single time for me, snap directly onto that mesh where it was, and it will close that seam now. The next thing, tools, move UV shell tool, I'm going to select it. I'm going to try this one more time. I have no idea why it says that. I was using this just last night and it worked fine. For whatever reason, I turn on my computer. I don't know. I turned on my computer today and it's not working. But luckily for us, there is another way. Tools, show UV toolkit. And this is actually an easier way, and we're just going to click unfold. And you'll see it should change. I'm going to press 6 here, and those should become now perfect little rectangle checkerboards. And if you zoom in, you'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly. Now I'm going to show you a tip, and you could, if you were struggling understanding how I did this section, this is probably honestly an easier way to understand. At least visually. I'm going to highlight this entire section of these faces on the corner, and I use this technique almost all the time. I find people usually understand this way for whatever reason more easily, so I'm going to go ahead and show you right away. Instead of doing it the way I was just showing you and constantly doing this cylindrical unwrap and possibly have to cut some seams and move and sew seams, this way allows you to select your seam right off the bat where you want it to be. So I'm just gonna start doing it, and you'll see what I mean here shortly. So I'm gonna hold spacebar on this, and I'm gonna go UV, and I have to make sure that I'm at this angle. Well, you don't have to be at this angle. It just helps the computer a little bit, and I think visually it'll help you. And I'm gonna do a camera-based unwrap here. Now you'll notice it has like these perfect little rectangles or squares from that angle, where it does actually sort of have this bend because it's only from this particular camera angle. Now, with that being said, what I can do is I can go on my edge here, and one of the other things, you'll notice that it has a red instead of a blue. That's saying that in this particular case, that the move UV shell tool, that the UVs are overlapping. If it's red, it's in reversed, and if it's like a purple, like you see here, that means they're overlapping. So I'm going to go hold right click, I'm going to go to edge, and I'm going to follow, this is that bold line where that seam is. I'm going to just start to run up this, and I can go all the way over to here. I know it's going to have the same matching seam. I'm going to hold shift and double click, and that should select that entire section from this point all the way up underneath on that same edge. Now, with that being said, I'm going to do a cut sew, and I'm going to cut those seams. So now I've created the seam without it creating it for me, but I find it for some people it's easier to understand because you're selecting where the seam will be right off the bat, and maybe it helps you, maybe it doesn't, but I find it to be very useful. So you'll also notice that it's blue on top and red at the bottom. It's because these faces are reversed and these faces are correct, just so you know. And now I'm going to, again, tools, move UV shell tool, I'm going to select my shell, and I'm going to run a unfold here in my UV toolkit, and that should give me some good rectangles. You'll notice that the rectangles or the checkerboards are not all the identical size, and that is a problem. We need to fix that, but we're not going to do it just yet. I have to fix this one. I'm going to highlight all these. I'm going to press 5 on my keyboard just to make sure, and you see all these seams here which are not really very attractive, and it doesn't help your texturing at all. I'm going to hold spacebar again, UV, and camera based. I could run a cylindrical. I just find it to be a little bit more difficult on especially this particular region than what it's worth, but it could just be me. Everyone has a different style. So I'm going to select one here because I see the seam from my previous projection, and I'm going to hold shift and double click here, and that should select the entire edge loop there. Cut sew, cut, that's going to cut that seam. I'm going to select my UV shell, I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to unfold again. Alright, now that is starting to get us to where we need to be. Now we've got everything unwrapped, but it's not all identical in size. The only other parts that I need to do are the caps, which I am going to hold right click, go to face, I'm going to run a click and drag, and then hold shift and deselect. It's just a fast method for me to select just these faces. In this particular case, I could run a planar, or I can run a camera based, because I'm going to unfold it no matter what anyway, and I just find that to be a faster way to do it. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, holding spacebar, UV, camera based. Ooh, I don't want to run the camera based yet. I want to make sure I'm underneath it. UV, camera based, and right there, if in case you've forgotten, as a refresher, I just pressed F to zoom in directly on that specific point. Okay, so now I've got my two caps unfolded, or unwrapped, whatever you want to call it. And for whatever reason the tool isn't working, so my move tool, this I don't expect you all to have the easiest time with this. Right here, for whatever reason, the move tool isn't working for me. I don't know what happened. It's just a little glitchy. I'm sure there's some type of reason for it that's really simple to understand. I just don't know what it is. Yep, I have no idea what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this one again. That's so weird. It just worked totally fine last night. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my transform tab here in my UV kit, and that's tools, show hide UV toolkit, or show UV toolkit, and in which case I'm going to go to transform, and then I'm going to go ahead, and this by default I think is at 1 maybe. I have mine set to 0.01, and I can just move it over I'm just clicking until it goes all the way over. I could even change it to 1 and just move that over. Tools, move UV shell tool, select that again, and I'm going to move that one out of the way. Now, tools, show UV to move UV shell tool. Technically, you should, super weird. Technically, you should be able to just move and sew all these seams and then unfold it. But I'll just show you a way that we texture artists and whatnot used to do this to make it a little bit easier. I'm gonna just find out to make sure that I'm on the right seam. So it looks like on this particular seam, it's the bottom of this one and this one. So I know right away, move UV shell tool, I'm gonna select this one, I'm gonna move this over here, and down here in my tools, under rotate, I think by default it is at 45. I'm going to change this to 1, and I'm going to rotate it by 1 degree. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scale this, not by 10. So if I scale it by 1, it does nothing. I think by default it's at 2. I don't want it to be that high. I'm going to make it like 1.1. So 1 does absolutely nothing. It's just like 1 equals 1 for whatever reason. Now 1.1 means it's going to enlarge it by 0.1 every time I click this scale button. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of try to match the size of it. And in here I'm going to do, I think I want it's not really that particular, but I'll just show you 0.99. And this should make it a little bit smaller. And then what I'm trying to do, you'll notice over here that the checkers should be approximately the same size if you unfolded it right. And the seams should start to come closer together because I have it kind of matched up. And in which case, what I can do here is now I'm ready to highlight this, and I'm going to do a tool or a cut sew, and I'm going to do move and sew, and that should snap it right into place. And I don't have to worry about it too much being distorted in any way because I've scaled it to that size that I need it to be. Again, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and find this seam, and that's the top of this, and I think it's down here, and this, no, let's see, I'm trying to find it. Oh, okay, I got it. So it's going to be the top of this one and the top of this one. So I know, if you see here, right here, I'm going to do tools, move UV shell tool. That unfold button actually works really surprisingly super well. And now for whatever reason I can't move it. I don't know what the deal is with that. Anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run my move, and then I'm going to rotate this. Start at 45. And then I'll do 1. And I'm just running a click, 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 click until I get it at the approximately this point. Now I'm going to go ahead and move this up. And I'm just using my my UV Toolkit to do this. I say that's approximately right. And then here, I'm going to do 1.1, and I'm going to start to scale this to match approximately the same size. I'd say that works pretty well. And then I'm going to go ahead and move this up, and I'll move it by 0.1. And you'll see right here, it starts to shift. And that's because I'm moving it around. And now I'm going to go to head. You should notice that the checkers are should be approximately the same size on everything. You'll notice that the seam is still right here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go to edge. I'm going to double click this edge loop, and I'm going to do tools, or I'm sorry, cut sew. I'm going to do move and sew, and that should snap it right into place. And you'll see that it's starting to come along where the checkers all are lining up very nicely. Now I've still got these two other sections. I'm going to start with this one, and I need to make sure I know which one it is over here. So I'm going to double click that edge. I got to find out which one it is over here. I think it's this one, and it is. And I'm going to do tools, move UV shell tool. I know this is really repetitive, but it's super duper 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 important. And actually this is a really complicated sort of and for whatever reason that doesn't work, so I can't use my move tool at the moment. So I'm going to use my UV toolkit over here, and I'm going to just start to put this in place, and then I'm going to scale it at 1.1. And you see it over here, it's starting, the checkers are becoming smaller because the UV shell is becoming larger. Okay. And over here, Okay. Alright, never mind. I was just trying to see something really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and scale this large, and then I'm going to rotate that at 1 degree until I get it approximately right, and 0.1, and then I know I need it to be slightly smaller, so 0.99, and I'm going to move it right up. I say that's a pretty good size. That's approximately the right size that I need it to be. Maybe one smaller. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edge, and I'm going to, you'll notice that both these edges are highlighted. Tools, move UV shell tool. I'm sorry. Cut sew, move and sew. There we go. Alright, now I still have this last section. So we broke this object into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections, and at the end of this there should be 3. The 2 caps from the bottom, and then also the 1 shell that's this entire thing. So I'm going to select my object again. I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to just make sure I know which edge this is. So I'm going to double click on this seam, make sure I select the entire edge loop, so I know it's the bottom of this one and the top of this one. So tools, move UV shell tool. Let's see if my move tool works this time. For whatever reason this time it's working. I don't know why, but hey, at least it's working for now. So I'm going to rotate this at 1 degree until I have it approximately lined up at the seams here, and then I'm going to go ahead and scale this 1.1, and I'm going to move it back into place. You'll notice again this is all changing over here. And this is 2018. It's changed so much. Maybe one more bigger? Yeah, I'd say that works. It's changed so much, especially the user interface, which I'm still getting used to because it's been set up one way for so long that all this new UV toolkit, and they changed all of this in the UI of the UV editor, I'm still getting used to because it's just they've had it one specific way for such a long time that this is all new to me when it comes to this particular user interface. Particularly with the UV editor. But as I use it, I'm actually beginning to become a little bit more fond with it. In old versions, this unfold button sometimes wouldn't work very well. In this one, it seems to be working just fine. But this, anyway, getting back to here, this is moving and scaling and rotating this is just an old-fashioned way how we used to do it. Probably could just select all the edges, move and sew them together, and then at the end click the unfold button. But if that doesn't work, this certainly should assist you in any unwrap scenario. So from this point I'm going to do cut sew and then move and sew, and now that'll snap that together so there's no more seam. And the last thing I want to do is select my move UV shell tool. I'm going to select the shell And from this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a one last time in unfold. Alright, and you'll see that just subtly changed it over here in the viewport. But one thing to take notice of is there should only be one seam, and you can barely see it here, but you can see it, and it runs right across this dark, bold, white line, so light line, and it should run all the way across the bottom, all the way to the other side. Now, whoa. Okay, never mind. I thought I had some extra stuff there that I may have not selected accidentally. But no. Anyway, so now from this point, what I'm going to do is I want it to fit inside of this. It needs to be inside this particular top right corner of this cube here. So, another cool little trick that certainly helps to get started. If you select here, and give me 1 second, under Modify, we'll go to Layout, and you'll see it lays it out right in here, and it's going to be just this cube, I believe. Whoop. I'm just seeing if I can let's go here really quickly. I was just seeing if I could get the checker to actually appear. I don't know why it's not appearing right now. There it is. So I just pressed 6 on my keyboard in my UV editor, and that allowed it to show. So 5 will turn it off, and 6 will turn it back on. And this is actually helpful because with this checker, it shows you the exact point in which you need it to be. Now the other thing is that these little caps, they're not going to be really probably visible at any point, in which case I want you to keep them in the file, but just so you're aware, in some cases to save poly count, they'll just delete them. They'll just delete the cap faces here if they're not going to be seen at all. But I want you to keep them just so you get a little better understanding of how to unwrap properly. Now with this laid out, I just did Modify, Layout. One last thing I want to show you. Oh, the unfold is in here also. One last thing I want to show you is I want to go ahead and maximize this space. So running it from top to bottom, it does a good job. It matches it right directly up to that line. Actually, it's just outside maybe. It's close. It's hard to tell. But I can get better usage of my space here. And how I do that is I'm just going to go down to my transform, and I'm going to rotate this approximately 45 degrees or so. Okay, and you'll notice right here that when I do that, I get far more room in my UV editor if I put this on an angle. And this is a really common practice used by texture artists and 3D modelers. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the scale at 1.1, and then I'm going to start to just get this, whoop, and I'm going to change this to 0.025 because I only want it to move very subtle, and maybe even smaller, like a 0.01. Okay, that works, and I'm going to go ahead and just put it right into place. And just make sure that it's inside the squares, which it is. And then make sure it's inside the square here. And then these, I'm not going to worry too much about, but I need them to be smaller. And I'm going to go to my scale and change this to 0.98, I guess, and then I'm going to actually, before I do that, I'm going to highlight both of them, and hopefully I'll be able to scale both of them simultaneously because they are the same size. I'll click unfold one really quickly to make sure that they're perfectly unfolded, and you'll notice that they did some subtle adjustment there. And I'm just going to keep clicking until I get it to be approximately a good size for me. Alright, they could go a little bit smaller. You ideally want them to have the same sort of consistency as these, but that's it. That's where we finish this unwrap. That's everything on this particular lab. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to continue working on this in the next video, and thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, be sure to message me. I know this was a little bit confusing, but it is really important to know, and if you can do this with no problem, you are on your way to being a very good texture artist and unwrapper, I guess you'd say, because unwrapping it is one of the most important things to do properly before you texture it. Anyway, there's my railing. I know it was a somewhat tricky one, especially with my move tool being wonky, and for whatever reason the unfold tool wasn't working. However, actually, let me just expand on that unfold tool. If I'm in my, the way it works is, just highlight this, is if you would go to your tools, move UV shell tool, you'd select it, and then you would do tools, and you would do unfold. For whatever reason, I don't know, this was just working the last time my computer was on, and then you would oh, you know what, I think, no, it's not. You'll have like a little dot on there, and it's going to be a brush tool. So if you hold B on the brush for the brush tool, and then you left click, it'll resize your brush. That's the idea of it. Otherwise, honestly, the faster way and better way is just to click this unfold button. Anyway, that's all I got on this particular lab. Again, we're going to expand on this in our next lab, and we're going to do some texturing, and I'm going to show you some pretty cool ways to hide seams, like right here. Anyway, that's all we've got, and thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, just be sure to message me.